Slashes, huh? What's your favorite scary movie?
Not that one.
All right. Well, hi. We are Joe and Trace of Bloody Disgusting's Horror Queers podcast, and I think we're just gonna jump right in, guys. All right. So this is a great example of queer horror, both behind the camera and in front of it, with actors like David Hyde Pierce and non-binary leads like Ryan Simpkins. So, as two queer men, why is it important, I guess, to you and just in general, to include queer talent and queer storylines in your work?
Because we're always left out.
Fair.
I don't know, to see our work in the world and help other people have visibility and create visibility for people who don't see themselves out there. And also, I feel like the origins of horror are such a queer space, and I feel like what's happened now, and I don't mean this in any negative way, but as usual, it's getting gentrified by the straight people.
And we all know gentrification is great.
Yeah. So it's getting diluted a little bit. Well, so bridging onto that. So, I mean, there's a pretty major subplot in the film in which, Tony is implied or maybe just stated to have been molested by one of his priests when he was a younger boy. And I will be blunt, it feels like as the film goes on, it kind of walks that back a little bit. And I was just curious if that was intentional on your part or not.
I don't even know what to say to that.
Yeah, I'm not I want to respond to your question with the question. What was it in the film that you viewed that made you feel like it was being walked back?
I think in the third act, when we we can spoil all this, obviously, this will come out after the movie actually comes out, but it felt like the implication in the third act was very much that, oh, the priest just quote unquote, got a demon into him, and it seemed to not want to, didn't address the molestation more beyond that point. It almost felt like it was saying, oh no, you think he was getting molested, but it was actually quote unquote just a demon.
Oh, interesting.
Oh. Yeah, that really wasn't the intention, but it's interesting but all interpretations are valid and interesting in their own way. So I'm not gonna tell you how to watch the movie. I guess,
I mean, it was the thing where I felt like we were really dealing with it in that first act, and then I don't know. Maybe my interpretation is wrong. But I guess then to branch off of that, how do you see queerness and religion intersecting in the film? Was it a conscious decision to keep it contained in Tony's backstory? For example, Lee tells Father Connor she doesn't know what she believes, and I guess that's kind of what's adding into my perceived ambiguity of the situation.
By the way, I think a lot of the ambiguities are intentional. I think those are the kind of movies we like that kind of leave it to your interpretation, honestly. I don't think we should be saying this is exactly what happened.
Yeah. I mean, I think for us, the impetus for including queer characters in a film that was playing in the sort of tropes of a subgenre that is historically pretty, I hate using this word, it's so overused, but patriarchal, sexist, and incurious about faith, and except to just be a booster for Catholicism, getting to sort of fuck around with that, to be honest, meant, I don't know, I was talking to someone else about this, I was born in 78 and I didn't know what sex was, but I knew what AIDS was before I knew what sex was. And I knew that I was gonna get it. I knew that I was part of a community that was viewed as dirty and broken and just outside of God's plan. And, I did my time in Catholic school, and I've been around, when I moved to the States, I was around a lot of evangelicals who, God bless them, were pretty small-minded. And especially now, I am I'm pretty sure I speak for both of us. I am sick to fucking death of so-called religious leaders who don't strike me as terribly Christ-like, picking on queer people, queer kids, trans kids. And I don't know, for us, if we were going to play around in the world of what an exorcism movie looks like, it felt transgressive to just simply matter-of-factly have queer people be a part of the side that's trying to bring someone back to decency.
Was there?
Sorry,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to ask, was there any pushback, I guess, from anyone involved, given the content of the film? Not at first.
Not at first, believe it or not.
But that implies that there was pushback later.
Yeah. Yeah. I can set that up for you.
And one person was quoted as saying, well, if it's not going to be euphoria, lesbian sex, why do we need the storyline?
Oh, come on.
Yeah. So, that kind of gives you a nutshell idea. We were very fortunate that, right from the outset, Kevin Williamson was like very behind that, behind this storyline about, and then, before we could do any planned reshoots, COVID happens. And then all of a sudden, the industry starts having its like Gromel seizures over and over again. And then people are freaking out and, I don't know, and who's going to be offended and blah, 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 so and you can kind of fill in the blanks. And
yeah.
And that comment specifically about, if they're not doing like full on blue is the warmest color scissoring, like somehow it's not worthy of, I don't know, that the innocence, the overall, the innocence and kind of simplicity of Blake and Lee's relationship was by design. We were like, I remember somebody was like suggesting like you should have one of them take a drag on the joint and then she exhales the pot smoke into her mouth. And I was like,
because that's never been done.
Yeah, I know. I was
just
first of all, I was like, wow, go on. I'm fascinated.
Transgressive. Ooh.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that person's actually recently been
No. I don't want to talk.
So that person who suggested that is no longer working in Hollywood.
I don't want to talk about
Okay.
So good ideas, bad ideas come from bad people.
Anyway,
there we go.
So yeah, it was a bit of a sticking point for a minute, but
I always say, we were tired of seeing women being hysterical and possessed, and then men saving them. And this is my byline for the movie that I want on my personal poster of it. It's about a bottom who's saved by two lesbians.
If only we could have sold the film on that.
I know, and that just they wouldn't put it on the poster.
No,
Yeah.
I don't understand. I mean, come on, you got to like get eyeballs. That's how you get eyeballs.
We'll make it the caption of this interview. That's what we'll.
And that was interesting because Russell is such, in a way, like such an archetype of male masculinity. Like oh my God, I will intimidate you. I'm this giant, indomitable, iconic actor from Gladiator, and we very much wanted to just spin that on its head.
Yeah, when we first met him, he said, he was like, in movies, I like to be the one driving the bus. And, like, I remember we put him on mute for a second. And then I looked at Josh and I was like, girl, in this movie, you are the bus. Like, what, like, if you're
being
possessed,
driven in this one.
If you're possessed, you're not in control. So I think that was one of the more enticing ideas about casting Russell. And one of the things that he really brought to the movie was sort of going to, I think, a more uncomfortable place of vulnerability. I think it was uncomfortable for him to allow himself to be in scenes where it was like we don't know if this guy's gonna make it, and
bottom acting, that's what it is.
Jesus Christ. So and we think he's pretty great in it. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned COVID and reshoots, which is, I imagine,
stressful.
probably dominated a lot of conversations of movies that were made in a certain time period. But yeah, this film obviously had a different title back in 2019 when it was greenlit, the Georgetown Project. So you've been working on this for like half a decade at this point. Can you walk us through some of?
Good night.
I'm sorry. I'm sure you're very proud to have it now finally come out and so on. But we're wondering, can you walk us through like what changed over the course of that production? Like how did COVID and all of the changes and stuff affect it?
Or the lack of reshoots? Because you said you weren't able to do reshoots, were you?
There's some things we were able to do, but we weren't able to ever like truly finish the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think I don't know. I feel like we changed the most.
Yeah.
I feel like it was and I think when you change drastically, well, the work does too, because you're just different person looking back on something, and it just looks different to you, and you realize there's other things you want to maybe emphasize, or a storyline that really that resonates with more who you are today. So that was interesting, trying to like track with that. And by the end, I felt like we were maybe finally at a place where the movie met us where we were.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. In that the ideas and the themes, when we were given the movie, see, there was that phase in the middle of this process that you're asking about, where that Hollywood typical battle where the movie's taken away from you and everyone's going to now panic, try to figure it out.
Yeah, everyone but you knows better.
And then eventually that movie gets put out. And then there's those weird miracles that happen where the president of the studio gets fired. Not fired, but replaced. So I don't know what happened. I really don't know. And then the new distribution company comes on board that's separate from the studio. And they saw a trailer of the movie and they went, whoa, wait. There's scenes in the trailer that aren't in the movie. What's going on here? And we're like, well, let us... and we don't want to throw anyone under the bus because that's just cheap. So we just kind of said, look.
You want to see?
Yeah. And we had a conversation and they said, well, look, the movie's coming out this date. You have a month and a half to add the stuff in. So we had a very, very precise amount of time. I'd like another 3-4 months, to be honest. And maybe one day we'll do an official, like a real director's cut, which would be very drastically different than this movie in certain ways. And especially the last third, actually.
Yeah.
But I think we had an opportunity to go in and recut it
and re-queer
and
the story.
Yeah, we put that back in. We put a lot of stuff back in, and I think while the movie we still want to do more work on, I think we felt it spoke enough to our original intentions that we stand behind it.
We were like, okay,
and we want this movie in the world, and it was vindicating to get the queer elements back in. It was vindicating to get certain visual stuff and certain story stuff we wanted to get back in and stuff. So
I'm actually curious because I grew up very Catholic as well. I was a person like, I knew about sex before AIDS, but I definitely thought that just by having sex with a man, like I would get AIDS. I thought that was like just the automatic thing you could get because sex education in Texas is not good. But I'm just curious, but with both of your experience and like dealing with Catholicism, like how was it working on a film where you're indicting the Catholic Church, but you're also like showing it in a positive light to be like, look, like you can be a good Catholic. It just you have to work around it. I don't know.
I don't know that I would qualify the movie as an indictment of the Catholic Church so much as just allowing for a movie about faith versus darkness to make room for the fact that that the Catholic Church can be both the arsonist and the fireman, especially in terms of Anthony's problem. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, when The Exorcist came out, the Catholic Church hated that movie.
Which is like so dumb because it's like the greatest commercial the Catholic Church ever produced.
Like they should hate The Omen, not
Hi.
The Exorcist.
Hello.
I think, my dad was, a fallen Catholic in many ways and had all the Catholic damage. My mother was Jewish, and I always say she had more Catholic damage than my dad, who was Catholic.
I know, it's so weird.
Right. It's super weird. I think look, Mark has more direct experience with that stuff, and I have always found it kind of spooky. I mean, I find I personally find Catholicism to feel like I'm going into a horror movie. When I've gone to my father's funeral and it was like this very formal Catholic ceremony, I was like, stand up, don't stand up, get on your knees, this and that. I was like, it. I choose my Jewish side because I always
My best side.
my best side. I just felt it always was a bit haunting to me and more heavily rooted in you're going to hell because Jews don't believe in hell, right?
Right.
So although your parent will try to convince you you're going to be wronged or guilty about something you've done because that's just being Jewish.
Yeah, they believe in guilt.
But you're not going to hell. You're living at your mother's house. That's hell. That's hell.
It's Beau is afraid.
Yes, exactly. Always. So, but I just felt that there was such a terror about it and there was such guilt associated with it. I always kept a distance. And I felt like my dad was so tortured having grown up as an altar boy. When he was cast in The Exorcist, when Billy Friedkin saw his play on Broadway, he was reading a playbill and my dad's picture was in there as the playwright. And he was like, oh, that guy looks really tortured. That looks like a really tortured person. And this is so much better. And that was
like the camera was like, no.
Just go.
and they were. I kind of thought, well, gosh, that's true. My dad was always had that look, and then he got the role. They didn't want him in that role originally. They wanted, I won't list the actors, but
Yeah.
he didn't even want to be in the movie because he just thought it was going to be some popular trash. And he read the book, and of course, he related to the themes about a man who having a crisis of faith. So going back to what you're talking about, Mark, I think that we all have those elements of faith that when we just really question it. But for me, that was when I was a queer person. I first really felt I believed in the religious God. And then when I started to experiment, I thought, well, I'm going to hell and that's what's going to happen. And it was sort of like, well, what am I going to choose? And so when we talk about, I think in some ways the movie is addressing that early pre-adolescent horror and trauma of feeling abused in a way by the church, by the religious figures that were in my life who kind of, in a certain way, conversion therapy is a form of obviously abuse. And I felt that some of the elements in my life at that time were like church abuses. And that was part of, I think, also a factor, a layer in this movie for us, for both of us.
All right. Well, maybe we'll try something a little lighter so as to not traumatize you further.
No, we've been so traumatized.
We've been talking and talking and talking and talking. So we're just like, at this point.
What's that great line in Women? Is it Women in Chains? What? The B movie. She's in the car with the guy. And he's like,
oh God, it's so horrible.
He's like, I'm gonna rape you.
And she's like, you can baloney. You can't rape me. I like sex. And it's just, you just go like, oh my God. Why? Honestly, though, why are you bringing that up? I'm not following the.
I'm okay with trauma.
Oh,
he likes being traumatized. Yeah,
right. Well, I mean, making anything is
traumatic.
Yeah, kind of.
I feel comfortable talking about it because I don't feel like I'm stuck there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one of the things we were wondering about is there's a couple of notable actors who appear quite briefly in the film. We were just wondering if folks like Samantha Mathis or Sam Worthington had additional scenes or larger arcs, and they
file that under things that we didn't have time to address.
Oh, okay. No, there were things that were also in the earlier, the cuts that,
Yeah.
We shot them to get to put them in.
Do you ask how? Oh, good. No, go ahead, Joe.
Can I ask how long? Sorry. Can I ask how long the original cut was when you first sort of submitted it? Because we did find that this is quite brief. Obviously, this feels like a studio mandate. Bring it in at about 95 minutes or so on.
Yeah, pretty much. I think about closer to 2.
Maybe an hour 50.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Do y'all have do y'all know anything about a physical release if deleted scenes will be on a potential Blu-ray release of this film?
There haven't been specific conversations about that at the moment.
But I mean what I say. Like, I would like to do at some point after I finish the next movie, I would like to do a kind of deep dive into a director's cut version on this, because there's a lot of cool scenes where there's scenes of the movie within the movie. We did a lot of those that I think is really cool.
That was the next question.
Yeah, because we love those parts, and then it feels again like as the movie progresses, it just kind of starts to drop off, and we were like, no, they clearly had some vision for it, because the movie opens with it. Many of the good like scary set pieces are involving the production of the film, so
exactly. So I would love to bring all that back. It's really cool stuff.
Well, okay, so both The Exorcism and the last film y'all wrote together, The Final Girls, they both feature like a film within a film. Is that a specific interest of yours? I find it all fascinating because I love the concepts. But like again, like, so is that something you want to continue in like your next films or something like that?
I mean, I think it depends. It depends on just I don't know. It's always story contingent, but I will say that I think meta horror, meta anything is an inherently queer. I mean, I hate sometimes I you know, like if you go on like a queer podcast, suddenly it becomes sound like this like militant like.
Oh, we love it. Bring it on.
But I think it's an inherently queer subgenre because it's about people questioning reality, questioning their own existence, of you know, like questioning if what they're experiencing is real or false or some kind of construct. And so I don't know. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I think that was like very that kind of like weird distancing effect was something I experienced certainly growing up and occasionally as an adult and in the year of our Lord 2024. But
I would say for me, it's the meta aspects of it are not necessarily like that's sort of an accident in a certain way. I think it's coming from a deeper choice, which is and this is a conversation I just had with someone, and it helped me sort of distill a lot of my trajectory in my life creatively. I'm an archivist, and I have a wealth of legacy and history behind me that I've been born into, from my grandfather to my mother to my father to my brother to my it never ends, right? Everyone in the family, and in a certain way, you can either like refute it or refuse it most of your life, or you can just like sort of embrace it and go, I have a duty here to carry on my family's stories and legacy. And there's a creative act in that itself. And so, I mean, we're literally sitting in a room right now where we're organizing negatives of my grandfather's photography for a beautiful book that's going to be published. And, you know, from his stuff in Palm Springs in the 40s and 50s. And, you know, that's something that we're both doing together. And that is another piece of like archiving, unpacking sort of the mythology of The Exorcist. Once again, we're making something about history. We're making about a historical film. These are all, I think this next movie that I want to do to direct is also going to be in that realm. So I think that's a huge part, and that just inevitably becomes meta because you're making stories about stories. And I think that's also very queer. Because I think, as my friend said, he says, faggots are archivists.
As evidenced.
You know, and the really like serious, you know, PhD faggots, as he called them, you know, we know the deep cuts, we know the deep like layers of film history and where we're seen and not seen and other parts of Hollywood history, but we're academic about it. And I think that comes from two places. I think it comes from always being under the threat of erasure, right? And then I can also like factor in having also being raised by a Holocaust survivor. So like those two combined, I'm like, okay, how do I continue to tell stories about where I'm from and who I am, which is where I'm from to some degree, right? Yeah. And so I think that's a huge part of it. And I just think the meta stuff just falls in because it happens to be the milieu. Like, let's do a story about the making of The Exorcist because it's part of the family lore. Okay. It's not intended as a gimmick,
And that wasn't what I was implying, by the way.
Oh, I know. Oh no, I know. I'm just saying, like, I'm understanding it more for myself now, actually, for the first time. It's like I'm distilling it.
So speaking of, just because we know that we're probably nearly out of time, just thinking about how, yes, we often know our history and we are willing to reference it. Just had a bit of a jokey final question. Is the vampire sorority show that Blake is meant to be a part of, is that just a commentary on Buffy or other sort of teen genre fare, or?
Well, I mean, Kevin Williamson's our producer.
Vampire Diaries.
Vampire Diaries.
Yeah, but I mean, it's I don't know. I when we wrote it, we were like, well, what's a show that we would want to what? Oh, Vampire Sorority. You know, like I don't know, like put sorority on anything, and I'm like, yes, I'll watch it. You know, so I don't know.
I would have happily watched a clip of her like filming a scene from that show.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those girls. They had Ryan and Chloe, they were just all in.
Yep.
Never had one issue about any of the sexuality between the two of them. They were completely comfortable. They were just
the day of. They were like, yeah, let's get it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
There's no scissoring. No scissoring.
I mean, yeah, because as we all know, it's not really gay unless.
Right.
I mean, there's just something so, obviously misogynistic about that, to say the least. And just, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Anyway, it was an informative moment. I learned a lot.
Well, thank y'all. So, I think that'll wrap it up for us. But thank y'all for also your candor. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Oh, if nothing else.
Sure. You're welcome.
I'll tell you what, we're very much looking forward to when you have full control, and hopefully we'll get to see that director's cut in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely. That you will have that. Yeah.
Just release it online.
I think it's very easy to. I think it's very easy to do something like this. It's just about
violate copyright law.
Like anything.
Sure.
Didn't do this.
Like anything, it's about money, right? And so we'll just put together the money and time, and after I don't want shoot the first movie, the next movie, and do it like after that for fun.
For sure.
Right.
All right.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you all so much again. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, guys.